Hi and welcome to the video on how to construct bass lines and an introduction to the bass. So if you're not really familiar with what the bass does, I think there's a lot to be said for the word bass itself. The bass forms the basis for everything. A lot of musicians will often be relying on the bass to keep a steady, strong groove and get the notes exactly right, because everybody else is kind of bouncing off that. It's really the bass or the foundation from which everything builds. And if it's unsteady, if it's wobbly, the whole structure of the song and the music is wobbly. Another great part of the word bass is basic. A lot of bass playing is very simplistic, and it might even seem overly simplistic. But in fact, one of the great skills of bass playing is what you don't play rather than what you do play. And things like the length of note, having the length of the note and the intention of the note absolutely perfect all the time, and that consistency. Bass is often quoted as being the link between the rhythm, or the drums, and the harmony, which is chordal instruments, guitars and keyboards. And it's also often called the glue in the band, in that what it does is it ties those drums and the harmony, the chordal and melodic instruments together. So in tying the rhythm together, what the bass does, it really tries to punctuate the essential parts of the groove, the pulse within the pulse, often also known as feel or groove. So they're doing that in combination with the drums, but they're also laying down the chord progression. I've got a great friend who's a drummer, and I'm talking to him one night at a gig about how, I just find drums amazing, that they can get all that separation in four limbs and make the incredible rhythms. And he said, yeah, look, the drums is great, but the drums just makes you bash your head front and back. He said, the bass is what makes you move side to side. And I thought that was a great description about really putting that depth of feel into the music. So when we talk about adding bass lines to drum grooves, there's a few things that we need to get on top of. The bass and drums together form the core of the rhythm section and create the groove of the music which the other instruments sit on top of. And one of the fundamental ways that the bass and drums do that is that where the bass plays is often tied in with where the kick drum plays. And they work together because they are in the same frequency range, low frequency range, so they really serve to accent or bind that part of the rhythm together. And this is what will come through as the essence of the groove. Now, the bass is not just restricted to when the kick drum plays and doesn't have to play every time the kick drum plays, and neither does the kick drum have to play with the bass. But one really important thing about bass playing is the idea, coming back to what I said about basic. Avoid getting too busy with the bass, as it can really clutter the music. There's a lot of energy, physical energy, in low frequency notes, and if the bass is playing a lot, there's not a lot of room for other things to come through. A little bit of music theory here, but the bass tends to play the tonic note, otherwise known as the fundamental or root note, on the first beat to establish the start of the bar, where that first beat lies, and the chord that is playing. So if I play the note C on the first beat of the bar, pretty much most of the time all the chordal instruments will be playing some type of C, depending on if that's C major, C minor, C dominant, or any other variation on a C. But the fact that the bass is playing that note C on the first beat really establishes that there is a C chord happening. As we'll see in a later example, the chordal instruments could be playing a C chord, but if the bass changes to another note, the bass will actually change the nature of their chord. Another very common bass note is the fifth note of the chord, and we're going to look at what the fifth note means in just a second. So apart from playing the tonic note and the fifth note as a foundation of a lot of bass lines, there's a very commonly used scale, which is used in rock, blues, groove, soul. It's used all over the place. It's not just used by the bass to create bass lines. It can be played by guitars. It can be the basis of the melody for singing. It's also a great scale for improvisation. So the meaning of pentatonic is 5, and the pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale. And it's derived from the major scale. So if I look at the major scale in the key of C, that's the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. All the white notes on the piano form the C major scale. We'll have a listen to that major scale being played in subsequent videos. Now, commonly in music theory, we assign numbers to each degree of the scale. So if the key is C, then the first degree of the scale is C, and D would be the second, E the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. And once you're up to 8, you have reached the octave, the note C and the note C again. Now there's two variations on the pentatonic scale. There's the C major pentatonic and the C minor pentatonic. And the major pentatonic for any scale is you start on the tonic note, the first note of that major scale, and use the first note, the second note, the third note, the fifth and the sixth. So in the case of the scale of C, that is C, D, E, G and A, they are the first, second, third, fifth and sixth. Now the minor pentatonic, we actually have to change a couple of the notes in the scale. They're more directly related to a minor scale, but we would need the C, the flattened third, so I take that third note E and I flatten it, it becomes E flat, F, G, and we take the seventh note, which would have been B, and we have to flatten that as well. And then we're up to C. And we'll hear a couple of examples now of these being played in famous tunes. Now the first tune we're going to listen to is The Temptations' My Girl, and the very opening riff, dum boom boom, dun dun dum, is the fifth note down to the tonic note, played by the bass. What we want to hear in this is the bass and the kick drum playing exactly together, very simplistic line. The bass is just playing the tonic, or the fifth and the tonic, exactly along with the kick drum. Also, when we hear the guitar riff, the very famous guitar riff come in, that is a major pentatonic scale.
Here they are, the Temptations!
That's the major pentatonic riff from the guitar. So we can hear the bass there is just going 1, 2, 3 and 4. Boom, boom, boom. And that's all the bass is doing. But it's leaving heaps of room for the other instruments to be heard. Now we're going to have a listen to a very famous minor pentatonic riff. This, of course, is Money by Pink Floyd. So that riff is doubled from the bass and the guitar together. It's actually also in a count of 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's have a listen to a few more famous pentatonic lines. Again, a doubled bass and guitar riff, and it's a minor pentatonic line. One more ultra famous minor pentatonic riff. Here we go.
It's getting near dawn. When lights close the tired eyes, I'll soon be with you, my love. Give you my dawn surprise. I'll be with you, darling, soon.
And in this section where the chord has changed, they've also changed the riff up to meet that chord and then back down to the original chord again, and the bass goes down to there. So now if I watch the piano keyboard and I start at the note C and go up all the white notes, I'll hear this C major scale. And if I take the first, second, third, fifth and sixth notes of that, I'll hear the major pentatonic scale. So first note, second note, third note, fifth note, sixth, and back to the tonic. And there's the riff from My Girl. Now the minor pentatonic is the first, and instead of playing the third note, the E, I flatten it, so it becomes that note. Fourth, fifth, and instead of playing the seventh note, the B, I flatten that, flat 7 tonic. and that Sunshine of Your Love just adds one extra note in, often known as a blues note, into that minor pentatonic scale. Now what we're going to do is we're going to program a very simple bass line. So what I've got here is a 1-bar drum groove, and it's exactly what we did in class. Kick is on 1 and 3, snare on 2 and 4, and I have 8th note hi-hats. I'm going to create a MIDI region on my bass track, which I've created, which is another MIDI software track. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the bass to track the kick drum. I'm going to make sure that I play my bass notes down low. My pencil tool is the right-hand tool, so all I have to do is I click on the note C. I'll give that a bit more velocity. And I'll just do it here on the 1st and 3rd beat, so it's exactly along with the kick. And you can hear with a very short note, there's lots of space left over for all the other instruments to come through. If I make those bass notes very long, you'll hear it really takes up a lot of space from the drums. So I mentioned that before, that the length of a note is really, really crucial. Now I'm going to add the 5th note in. So to add the 5th note in, I'm going to start on my 1st note, which is this one. And because the C major scale has all the white notes in it, I'll just count up 5 white notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to put that on 2 and. First bar, second beat, and 2 and. And I'll shorten that. Let's have a listen. Okay, and I might put another one over here. Okay, and now that I have those notes here on 2 and, and 4 and, I may even go back to my drum and I might add another kick in at 2 and. I'll shorten that one up, not that it really matters for drums, and 4 and. And now the kick and the bass will be exactly aligned. Let's have a listen. Okay, now it's not much of a bass line, but again, the bass lines themselves may be very, very simplistic. It's what's going on top of them. So playing a C note here, I would be having some type of C harmony going on in my chordal instruments, whether they were the guitars or keyboards. So one thing you need to be very aware of when you're pulling loops out, and they are bass loops from the browser window, is that when the bass changes its tonic note, then you must follow those changes in the bass with your chordal instruments. So I'm just going to quickly find a bass note here with that stays on one note, and then I'll find one that changes chords, and we'll hear the difference. So the first bass line I found here is the Bread and Butter bass 2, and it's a classic straight 8th rock bass. That means the bass is playing all of the 8th notes, and that meets up not only with the kick drum but the hi-hats from the drums. So we can hear there's no variation on that note. Dum, everything that's played is that note. So that's a C note, and you could use any type of C chord on that and that would work. Now I've pulled out a audio loop here, and let's have a listen to this audio loop. And we can hear in this bar it's changed chords. So it starts as the note C and then goes to the note F. Let's have another listen. And so that means when that bass changes to that F and establishes F as the new tonality, you would have to have your chords also change to F. One last thing I said I would mention is the power of the bass in changing chords. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a C chord. So I'm going to start on the note C. And if I put that on a C bass note, it's firmly established as being a C chord. But if I change that bass note, I'm going to go to an A. What I've actually done is I've changed that C chord to an A minor chord purely through the movement of the bass. That's how powerful the bass is. It can actually change the chord that the other instruments are playing. So in summary, don't get too complicated with your basses. You can even just play a tonic bass note through a whole tune where you're following the chord progression with the bass, establishing that tonic note, particularly on the first beat, and you'll have some type of bass line that works. But as your groove develops, use the bass to highlight the certain aspects of the groove, often along with the kick drum. You know, whether your groove is a boom, 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 or a doom, 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 or even something much more complex. That's what the bass will do. It will really lay the foundation of that groove. When the tonic note of the bass changes, remember to change your chords as well, and listen when you're going through your browser loops. If the bass note changes, you're either going to have to find a chord that changes and in the same way, or you'll have to trim your bass line down so that the bass note, the fundamental note, doesn't change, and then your one chord groove from your guitar or keyboard will fit.